From Svitek comes a weekly digital series where he shares his insights, concepts, and findings learned during his 15-year journey of working in the entertainment industry. Each lesson offers you a roadmap to overcome the challenges that all artists face on the path to success. Welcome to a Phil Svitek podcast.
Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 creative coach, and for this episode, I'm joined by my friend Will Abeles, who I've known since college, although I haven't really seen him since college. And one of the ways in LA, at least, we like to catch up is to do a podcast. And Will's joined me for a couple of episodes this week. And right now, while we've gotten to know him in little spurts, I really want to focus on your life, what you've been doing, before college, post-college. Maybe we'll skip the college years.
We can skip the college years.
That can go nuclear.
Yeah.
But, for context, you're a comedian, among other things, as we all are, but primarily a comedian. And now you're essentially kind of, I would say, shifting into sixth gear of comedy.
Yeah, doing my best to, at least.
And yeah, so, I'll set the stage and you can kind of take it from there as far as so you've been in New York for a while, been touring various places, but now you're thinking about moving to see the opportunity, but still would be touring, correct?
So that's kind of what the next 6 months is going to be all about. I left New York on January 8th, and I was on the road from January 8th until February 2nd, getting myself out to Los Angeles, toured through Pennsylvania, Maryland, Georgia, Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, Texas, and then all the way through Texas. And then
this is you driving.
It was just me driving. Yeah.
Okay.
The first half of the tour,
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a little nuts. The Maryland and PA portion was about 10 days, and I'm from Maryland originally, so I toured with a comic, and we stayed with my parents for a portion of it, and we were able to drive to and from some of the shows and just crash my parents. And then I was lucky that the rest of the tour, I pretty much knew someone in every single city, except for Marfa, Texas. That was one of the only ones I didn't know anybody.
I didn't even know Martha, Texas existed.
Marfa with an F.
Marfa.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very interesting town. Had a really fun. I did a saloon, so I could say I performed at a saloon in West Texas, and I didn't know anybody in Tucson or Phoenix. So those were the last 3 days. So I was pretty fortunate to be able to crash with somebody, or just at least have a friend that I could hang out with in most of the cities, which was cool.
Are this from a comedy perspective? Are there differences in the various towns, various parts of the country? How do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm lucky in that I've done the road for a couple years now, and so my comedy specifically is I do a lot of storytelling. I do that in real life anyway, but that's what I do for my material. And so because I do a lot of storytelling, it's usually an experience that has to happen to me. So I talk about my family a lot, talk about dating a lot, and it's fairly clean. So it does pretty well on the road because not all of us live in Brooklyn, and that's one thing that I value, that I did get out of Brooklyn to not see someone else's opinion, but you just it's just such a different world, and going to a small town where people don't have as many experiences as you might living in New York or LA or whatever it is. It's fun to see the material hold up either with a Brooklyn audience or with an audience in Marfa, Texas, where it's just a very different lifestyle. But yeah, so that's kind of why my material is geared that way. That being said, there are certain markets I go to that I'm like, okay, well, that one specific joke definitely will not work. Or I have I did a Moose Lodge once, and I was talking about a dating app, and I could just see the blank stares, and so
did you have to kind of backtrack and explain what Tinder is? And
I just kind of took the hit. There were enough young people. They were this was a room of 200 people, and there were maybe 15 under the age of say 45, and so those 15 people knew what I was talking about. Everyone else just had no idea, and so I'd already started the joke, and I just took the hit. I just let those 10 people laugh, 15 people laugh, and the rest just stared at me. But that's comedy.
But did you know okay, so I'm just gonna take the hit with this one, and then it's gonna possibly be smooth sailing? Because in my mind, I almost kind of think about it do you just stop right in the middle and be like, all right, everyone, take out your phones. We're gonna download this app called Grindr.
And
then all of a sudden, all the guys are like, wait, this is a fucking gay app?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, what the fuck?
No, I usually have I'll have like a quick line at the end where like just, I kind of make fun of myself for not being aware of you guys not knowing the apps. I'm like, yeah, well, that one sucked or whatever it is, and then I usually recover. But sometimes sometimes you can lose the audience and they just don't trust you anymore. And they're like, well, we thought he was funny for the first two, but now we know he sucks. And they just don't want to give you a chance to like try and win them back. But when you do win them back, it's one of the coolest feelings.
I feel like every comedy interview I've ever like listened to, they always talk about the idea that you have to like bomb first couple of shows because that sets you up. Is that true?
I mean, comedy's subjective, and I think even being a comedian, you have your own ways of getting to like whatever your goal is. But I don't know. You learn a lot when you bomb. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's like good to bomb right out the gate because sometimes, I mean, so for me, the very first show I ever did was at Emerson. That's how I started comedy. I was when we were in college, and I was bombing the entire time.
Hey.
Thank you for protecting us.
Stop. Thank you for the commentary. Hey, everyone did their job. You did your job. Good job.
And she got her little bark in at the end.
Let's just pick up you starting at Emerson doing
okay.
Whenever you're ready.
They good? All right. So, yeah, I think everyone should bomb. And then, so I started.
Sorry, your battery light is flashing. Just so you know, I don't know if that matters right now, but.
It just matters if it shuts down. So just,
okay.
Yeah. But it's still rolling? All right,
Cool. So I started at Emerson when we were in college, and the first show I ever had, I was just bombing. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I did it was because I had a roommate who was like, you should try comedy. Like, you should try stand-up. And I was like, all right, well, this is my friend, so I'm going to take his advice. And I wrote what I thought were...
Was it genuine, or was it trying to be like, hey,
no, it was genuine.
Let's see how bad you bomb?
No, it was genuine. But I wrote like a bunch of one-liner jokes, and they were terrible. And I don't really do too many one-liners now, and they were all really, really bad.
Were they cliche? Because I feel like I find most artists when they start off, like they're pulling, like I remember from my writing, I'm pulling every cliche in the book.
Oh yeah, they were bad. They were bad jokes. And so I'm just sitting there with silence. My two roommates that were in the audience were loving it, but everyone else was just, this was terrible. So then I'm coming up on, I get the light, and I was like, man, I that wasn't funny at all. Like, and now I have to get off stage soon. So I just started telling a story, and it was at that time the most popular story I had been telling my friends that everyone like seemed to enjoy, and it did great. And like I got an applause break, and I was like, oh, I like this. Yeah. And so I did it a second time a couple months later, and I just told stories, and I just wrote stories, and I worked really hard on it, and it went really well. So
okay. Sorry, I get ADD with this stuff.
Yeah.
So you kind of can look at comedy as far as like, you know, nowadays, like everyone just wants the punchline right away. And to me, when you say story, like it doesn't mean that it's not funny, but it takes longer to get to the setup and the punchline. Yeah. So like, I don't know, how do you approach that with people's waning attention span versus, you know, like there's going to be them having that trust in you that there's a funny bit coming. Yeah. You just might have to wait 15 seconds instead of 3.
Well, you throw some, just, you have your little lines that you throw in there throughout to kind of keep them going. You know, you give them the appetizers, you know, until they get to the main course, essentially. And that's just, I don't know, that's how I kind of talk in general. So it wasn't too hard of a transition to figure it out. But I also, I just studied other comics that do storytelling or they do long form jokes.
Like top 3?
Gary Goldman. If you watch Gary Goldman, I mean, I forget how long the actual joke is, but I think his Trader Joe's joke is 20 some minutes long, and it's one joke, it's one story, but it's broken into like maybe 6 or 7 jokes on like an album, like a breakdown. And there's a point where you don't even realize he's been telling the same story for 20 minutes, but it is one story. It's just there's so many different things that happen. He goes on little tangents, and he takes you through different channels and everything. But I would study him specifically. Other storytellers, I really like Tom Segura. He does the same thing. Not quite to that extent. Like he has a lot of stories, but they're not. Gary Goldman loves words. Like he really loves words, and so I've always tried to emulate that. And then Mark Maron, he's pretty good about telling stories, and very different styles, very different comics. But I would watch them and figure out, okay, how does he do 20 minutes? And you have to give them appetizer. But Goldman's also a master at it, so it's tough to try and do it like that. But that's pretty much the long and short of it. Is you give them little pieces and take them there. Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. And like, so, I mean, you sort of were talking about like family relationships. Like, is that your primary pool of drawing for jokes?
Yeah,
or
definitely.
Is there any, like, I don't know, do you talk about like life as a comedian on the road as well?
A little bit. I have a couple of newer stories that I've been telling, and but they, even though they're about being a comedian on the road, they're more about dating and just some stuff that's happened. But I talk about my brother, specifically my brother Kevin, a lot because he's probably the funniest person on the entire planet, and he's not trying to be. He's just naturally very funny, and I've just had we're 12 years apart. So
He's older or younger?
Younger. And so there's, we're two different generations, and we're in the same household. And so he's really easy to pull from because, growing up with a cell phone, cell phones existed. He had it the entire time, so dating for him is very different than dating for me. And just, it's kind of incredible. Like having conversation, like he had to explain to me what TikTok was, we like did a TikTok video together, and I was like watching him create the thing. And I was like, I'm never going to learn this,
Have you not learned it, or that was just
I got so overwhelmed just watching him that I have not done it. So
okay.
Yeah.
Don't fall behind the times.
I know. Well, that's happened already.
I think you're too young for that, but hey, that's just my opinion.
I'm pretty good at it. Yeah.
I want to go back for 1 second. You mentioned your album, Things My Dad Regrets.
Regrets of My Father.
Regrets of My Father.
Yeah, that's a funny one too, though.
The second album. Yeah. Although you are working on a second album.
I am working towards a second album. Yeah, that one.
Before we get to that one.
Okay.
See, that's my like interview ADD. So let's talk about the first album, like, because I mean, like, in a way, albums like used to be the thing. And now you kind of have Netflix. Also, like, I feel like jokes get isolated on YouTube, maybe now on Instagram.
Yeah.
You were mentioning TikTok.
Yeah.
Although you're not a big TikToker guy. Maybe some people are posting your jokes on TikTok. So like, I don't know. Yeah, just talk about the album and how do you view albums in this current comedy landscape?
Well, I mean, it's fun. It was funny because in my bubble, most of my friends on Facebook, all social media are comics. So we are all doing albums, and the album kind of came about because Netflix isn't knocking at all our doors, and some of us haven't earned that yet, But you do work on this headliner material, and you want a way to share it.
And for prosperity reason, I would imagine, for yourself.
Or sometimes you just want to retire material. Like, let's say you've been doing it for a long time. And I was at a point where the album was my album kind of came spontaneously. We were doing a anniversary show for a show a show that I run called Hey, It's a Comedy Show. And we were doing the anniversary of it. And I always do a half hour at the end. And a friend of mine was getting into audio recording, and he was like, can I record you?
Yeah.
So we did it as a test run, and I just did the half hour, and it went okay, but then that's how I got the bug, and I was like, let's do a full album. And so we did it a second time. And
so full album, like time-wise, what is that? Like
I specifically wanted to do 40 minutes.
40 minutes, okay.
Because if I had done an hour, it would have been fine, but it would have been pulling from the well of jokes that I don't really believe in anymore, and I wouldn't have been too happy about it.
You buffer that shit with like laugh track in between. Like everyone's just laughing for like 2 minutes.
Yeah,
and you're like, all right, guys, please stop laughing. Okay, I got another joke.
No, stop it. Yeah, that didn't happen. So we did. So I did 40 minutes, and I was happy about it, and then found out that we had lost all the audio.
Ooh.
And I'm not popular enough to fill a room for a third time, let alone just the 2 times we did it. So I happened to record it on my cell phone, and then we ended up editing that audio, and that was...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that was
Wait, so how does it, like, okay, this is crazy to me. So, like, what, it's in your pocket, or like...
It was sitting out recording, so it was out in the audience, sort of. It was close to the audience.
So it picked up, like, the speakers?
So it picked up, just what was coming out of the speaker. And we couldn't use anything recorded because we were also recording it on camera, and we couldn't use that audio because it didn't match up and it didn't have the full tape. Mm-hmm. So it was a thing. It was a whole thing. But a friend of mine edited it, and it's one of those, like, when you hear what it sounded like on the phone versus what he did in the editing room, you're like, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. But if you just hear it, you're still like, it's kind of hard to hear a little bit. But we did it, and then I went and then I self-produced it and distributed it through CD Baby.
I know CD. I know the Yeah, the guys who started it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
cool.
cool. CDB is awesome.
Yeah, they were great. And then for the marketing part, I was like, all right, no one in New York cares really. Like my friends do, but like no one's really going to care too much. So I went home to Maryland and I focused on one specific market, and I got on like my local news, and I tried to get in the newspaper, didn't work, but got in the local news and just promoted
Like
it that way.
You made appearances as like a comic.
Yeah, to promote it. And I had a friend who at that time was a news anchor, and he helped out a little bit. And I really wanted to get number one on iTunes. That was my goal. So, financially, I should have been plugging Amazon and Pandora and everything else, but I really wanted everything to be focused through iTunes. And then it debuted at number one on iTunes.
You were still getting a financial return, but just not as big. Is that what you're saying? Or just
it wasn't going to be spread across as much. Yeah. But it debuted at number one on iTunes, and it was really cool. So the plan
That's
worked
awesome.
and everything. Yeah, and it was great. And it was up there for 2 days, and then dropped to like third, and then just disappeared, and then it was gone. But it was cool because it was another fairly popular comic who had an album come out and to beat him, and I was like, oh, all right, thank you, Marilyn. Like, thanks for helping me out there. So anyway, the whole point of going through that, I felt like you had to just know the backstory of how chaotic the album was. But one of the reasons that I did it was, I wanted to retire with some material, and a lot of comics I know in New York that are doing albums are just comics that I really respect, and they're kind of the next step thing, so we can't quite do a special, but we can do an album. And I don't know, as a comedian, it feels cool to...
What is the difference, like for lay people like me? What the hell's the difference between an album and a special?
Well, specials recorded, like it's a video.
Video.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And some people like say Bill Burr has a Netflix special out, an album follows it, and it's the same thing. It's just an audio recording, so you can hear it in your car or whatever.
Yeah.
But just, I don't know, I like the album because it's something that's been in comedy for so long, and it was one of the first ways you could find comedians. You bought the vinyl and you played it, and your family got around, they listened to it. And I'm not saying I have any vinyls, but it's just cool to be a part of that history in a weird way. And
what was kind of interesting, like your album essentially is just one straight take overall, right? Like, because with specials, I mean, I know comics that like maybe film 3-4 shows, and it gets cut together. They're wearing the same, the outfit, all 4 shows.
Haircut,
so that way, so you can cut it together.
Yeah.
Because one delivery might be better on one show versus another. Maybe the laughs are like whatever the case may be. So I find that very fascinating that yours is like legit, just you did it.
And, it was that because we messed up. I mean, that ultimately, so I also was branding it as a live album, which is funny because I'm not edgy. I'm not going to say anything that really offends anybody. So it wasn't like live where it's like, oh, we're going to catch him saying something ridiculous. But it was cool to have like a live, promoting it as a live album, which was really fun. But most people try and record it twice and they cut it together. And the next one I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to try and do that.
And, so are you in the midst of planning that, or like where are you at with the stages?
Yeah, so I my goal is to record it in Portland, Maine, because that's one of my favorite places to perform. I love the comics there. I love the audiences there. And I'm hoping to do that in May or June. But I'm right now in the planning process of, okay, I need to get that date in and then filling up time leading up to that so I can practice it and make sure it's polished and everything.
Yeah. And what's kind of interesting to me, getting to know you in these past few episodes that we've done together, that you guys can check out, is this idea that you're not afraid to call upon favors. Because I feel like you would be a shitty comic if you weren't able to just kind of reach out.
Yeah.
Whether it's cold calling or, like you said, with your friends that are news anchors or whatever, you made that call. Like you had the wherewithal. Like you could have, like I know people that would reach out to somebody and kind of be like, do it all half-assed of like, hey man, how you doing? And as opposed to just like asking right away, like
how can we do this?
Yeah, like hey, I've got a comedy album coming out. What can we do?
Well, I mean, I don't ask. Yeah, I do. I mean, that definitely was asking favors, but I mean, I don't ask favors of, or I try to at least. You always have your moments, but I try and to look at it more as like collaborating and people that I've been supporting and people that want to support me. So, my buddy was a news anchor, but we like grew up together, went to high school together, and we've always supported, like he was in a band. So, we just did it. So when I reached out to him to help, it was like, what's the best way to make this happen? And he was like, oh, this will be great. Like you're local. Like it's so, at the same time he gets something out of it. It was like, oh, we have a story. This is great. We have a story that we can do. And then I did an interview and it was a lot of fun, but I always try and make sure it's seen more as like a collaboration, and I try not to make it a one-way street. Like if someone helps me out, I want to try and help them out in any way that I can as well, just depending on what that is. So because I can't necessarily. So like I'm going to Denver in March, and this guy helped me get every single show I have booked in Denver. And recently he was like, "Hey, do you have any contacts in Chicago?" And I was like, I can't help you at all. I have no contacts, but I did send him a list of contacts that like I don't have any relationship with them, but another friend that I have from Chicago helped me out. So that's what I mean. It's like I try not to just make it take. You want to make sure there's a balance and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Because your life is going to be short-lived if that's your reputation.
People pick up on stuff quick. I mean, you can maybe get away with it for 6 months to a year, but
maybe nowadays.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, maybe not even that, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What other questions you got?
How about comedy in New York versus LA?
Oh,
like the style, like the scene.
Okay.
As kind of like.
Yeah, I get you. It's still rolling.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so kind of shifting gears and sort of going back to the beginning when we talked about you moving. What is the difference in terms of the scene between New York and LA?
Yeah.
I mean, you got two completely opposite coasts, and you look at like, there's a surfer attitude in California. At least that's what people associate with. Whereas like New York state of mind type of thing. So like I imagine comedy's different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, and I'm still fairly new to the LA scene, but from the few shows I've done and what I've gathered from it over the years of visiting and all that, I've it's New York is massive. I mean, not saying LA is small or anything, but like New York is such a big scene, and there are pocket scenes within it. Like it's such a big city that you can only perform the Lower East Side for 3 years, and there's enough work there that you can keep doing that. But that's because New York has a lot of bar shows. We have a lot of bar shows, and there's
what constitutes as a bar show? Explain that.
Well, just not calling it an open mic usually is the difference. But they're open mics, but they're branded as open mics, and that's where you go and you practice. A bar show, usually there's a producer. The bar is aware that you're going to be there sometimes, and some shows are really good independent rooms, like Knitting Factory. Like it's quote unquote a bar show, but it's not. It's this massive deal, right? I've noticed that LA doesn't seem to really have that. So it seems to be hard to be a young comic, like just starting out, I mean, in LA, as opposed to New York, where New York you can get the opportunities, you can do as many mics as you want a night, you can get on some bar shows, and you can keep practicing for when you're ready for the clubs and for some of the bigger independent rooms. On the other side, with LA, because they don't, at least from what I've seen, they haven't had those bar shows, you might be going and doing a club much earlier. And in that regard, because all the headliners kind of live here, or the guys that are on TV and on Netflix, you could be on a show with some of the biggest deals in comedy. Yeah. And not saying that doesn't happen in New York, but I feel like when, say, like Rory Scovel comes to New York, he's doing a theater. He's not doing our bar shows and our independent rooms as much. But here, he's doing the clubs, and he's doing stuff with comics just starting out. So I guess that's probably the biggest difference I've seen between the two.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'm no expert at all, but I also do think I think it's expanded beyond just New York and LA. So meaning I am friends with like Adam Carolla, and he did a whole movie called Road Hard, which is based on his life of like, you used to get like a comedy special, or you're like you were part of something or whatever else, and now it's kind of going back to the days of you have to be on the road. Like you want to be a comic, you got to get back on the road.
Well, it depends on what you want to do in comedy. Some people they want to more so be a TV personality than they do want to write the perfect joke or whatever it is, and so there's that. But I think if you want to, and it also comes down to do I want to make money doing comedy?
I mean, I would imagine who doesn't?
And yeah, right. But that's I think where the road comes into play, because if you just want to be a working stand-up comedian, you really have to do the road pretty often because that's where the money is. But at the same time, it's a grind, and you might not have that home life that you want or whatever it is. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is what your goal is in comedy. Like, is stand-up a stepping stone to go into acting for you, or do you want to have a sitcom, or or do you want to write or whatever it is?
So taking all the questions you just asked, let me kind of reverse them and flip them on you. Is this a stepping stone? Do you want to be an actor in a sitcom? Like what?
Yeah.
What's the goal of the stand-up?
Well, so kind of like what the very first question was that we started with. That's kind of what the next 6 months is all about, is figuring out a lot of things that I've kind of ignored, I think, finding a new market, what I want to really do in comedy. And, I know when I first started, you're like, all right, I'm getting SNL, I'm doing all this stuff. And then the goals get a little bit more, okay, let's do something more obtainable at the moment, Right now, I really like just working the road and just working on this album and being ultimately a headliner comic. If a sitcom came my way, I wouldn't say no. I would like to get back to screenwriting a bit more. Like I used to do that a lot, and I've moved away from it. But I don't, I guess my ultimate goal is I would love to have a special out. And I think the only way for me to do that is if I just keep focusing on stand-up at the moment. But I don't necessarily have aspirations to act. I did at some point, but right now I really just want to do stand-up.
But you're also not one of the, like, if an opportunity came of like, all right, we're going to put you on this sitcom.
Oh, I'm
it's
not
not like
say
you're
no.
going to be like,
No.
no, I want to be a comic.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'd be thrilled if the opportunity came my way, but at the moment, I'm not submitting to go on auditions. I'm not submitting packets or anything like that. I'm just focusing on stand-up at the moment. And then I think, once I finish the next album, because the next album's also about retiring kind of the last 2 years of my life, like going through a breakup, figuring out who I was and who I was outside of the relationship and everything. I kind of want to just retire that material and then go, okay, so cool. So we have 2 albums. We have all this material that we just worked on, and then figure out, like, do I want to start focusing on the next step of, like, maybe being a TV personality or whatever it is. But at the present, I just want to focus on being a stand-up comedian.
Okay. I think that's very admirable. I think sometimes, like, people they have so many ambitions that, that they're left spinning every which way and then don't end up going anywhere.
Yeah, and that's something I used to stress myself out, and I was like, all right, I got to have 2 pilots written, and I have to have a podcast, and I have all this stuff. And I sort of tried that and doing stand-up, but I was noticing that I wasn't doing great at any of them because I was spreading myself thin and I was just stressing myself out. So I made a decision, like, let's just get very good at one thing. And then once you feel that you're good at it, then we can start trying the other things, because you're going to be bad at it for a little bit until you get good. So let's just know that we have something that we can rely on as your talent and then move to the next project.
Awesome. Yeah. Any final things you want to share before we wrap it up?
Not too much going on. Just keep an eye out for the next album. It is going to be called The Pride of Hagerstown. It's based on, so when I first started touring in 2018, I did a show back home, and there's a town next to mine called Funkstown.
Okay.
And it's tiny little town. And I'm doing this.
Not that yours is that big to begin with.
No, I mean, it's only like 100,000 people. This one's even tinier. And the host was introducing me, and he was like, guys, this guy's in from New York. His album came out at #1 on iTunes. Give it up for The Pride of Hagerstown. And I posted on Facebook, and a buddy of mine that I went to high school with went, wow, Will, congrats. You finally knocked off the Roy Rogers across from the Goodwill downtown by the police station as The Pride of Hagerstown. And after he said that, it made me laugh so hard. And so I kind of...
All right, so you're the Pride of Hagerstown.
So keep an eye out for The Pride of Hagerstown coming out. And also you can follow me on Instagram, because I am touring back across the country, and I'm going to be in Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina for the majority of April. And then hopefully I'm heading back up to New England in May and June and finishing the album up. But yeah, you can follow me in case I'm coming to a city near you. I'll be in Kansas City, Denver, St. Louis. I'm going to be all over the place.
Not Kansas City, Kansas.
No, Missouri. Yeah.
Okay.
Found
Good
out
to know.
Big difference. Found out
Teaching
there's a big
everyone
difference.
geography.
Yeah. Well, I'm learning it myself. I'm like, oh, I bet Palm Springs and and Denver are close. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. Well, now I know how maps work. But
I mean, theoretically, depends. In the grand scheme of the universe, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you're driving, I guess makes a difference. But yeah, so you can follow me at Will Abeles Comedy on Instagram, and then you can find out if I'm coming to a city that you'd like to see me in. If sometimes I'll be headlining, sometimes I'll be showcasing, but should be fun all around.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely check out his stuff, all the stuff that we highlighted. One more time, just give us the laundry list of all the stuff.
So if you want to check out the album, it's Regrets of My Father, and you can check it out on iTunes or Pandora or technically Spotify, but please don't do it on iTunes.
It doesn't support him as much financially.
Doesn't support me as much financially. You can do that. You can follow me on Instagram at Will Abeles Comedy. You can follow me on Facebook at Will Abeles Comedy, and you can follow me on Twitter at Will Abeles. And if you're looking for the next album, keep an eye out for The Pride of Hagerstown. Hopefully that'll be end of the year will
All right.
hopefully be when it's out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm at Phil Svitek. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you being a guest host on the various episodes as well, so you can check those out as well. And until next time.